All right, guys, just a little bit about ourselves. I'm Nathan, and I've been using HTML and CSS for a couple of years now. And Alex, care to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. Over the summer, I actually did an internship at this product design agency, and I was mainly on this web development team for a local, or it wasn't local, but it was local to me at that point, site for a client. And then I also got to work on some internal ventures as well. So I will be helping out with the second half of this bootcamp.
Yep, sounds good. All right, let's get right to it. So we'll start off with the code. So here, you'll be able to access the code that we use and the template that we use. And we'll provide access to the slides and the code after we're done. Okay, so first of all, VS Code. What is it? How do you set it up? Here's how. This is a link to download VS Code. If you guys would like to code along with us, you can by downloading VS Code first, and then also install this extension. It's called Prettier, and that will format your code such that you can actually read it nicely. So you just go under the extensions tab, type in Prettier and install. All right. So now the project setup. So here is this is going to be our project setup. And first you're going to create a new folder inside of your, this is just a standard project setup. So you have a CSS folder, HTML folder, you have your media or images, you have your JS folder and your index.html folder. And this is your kind of root. This is where you're going to be. This is going to be your homepage HTML. Okay. HTML, let's get started. So first of all, to start off with HTML, there's some boilerplate code. And if any of you guys don't know what boilerplate is, it's like the bare bones, kind of. The bare bones, it's a default code that you need to run the file. And that's this. So the shortcut on VS Code to do that is to hit Shift-1, which gives you the exclamation point, and then press enter, and then it automatically generates all of this code. The comments I added, we added because just to show you guys what each line of code is doing. So we'll start off here at the, can you guys see my cursor, by the way?
Yep, I can see your cursor. Yep.
Okay, great. So here's head tag. So we'll start off here. So we have a head tag, and this is where kind of all the information about your website goes. So here we have your meta char set is equal to UTF -8. So this is just setting the language. You don't really need to know what it does, but just know that this is necessary. And these two come. The meta data is also important for. We'll talk about that later, but it's good for how to find your website on a browser. So let's say Google, right? It organizes relevant sites, and this kind of helps with that. We'll talk about that. If Alex wants to expand on that, he can, but we'll go on to the next thing for now though. So on line 9, we have the title. So this is where, if you guys notice, I can try stop sharing. Okay, so you guys can see how it says up top here, Bootcamp session 1, right? That's what this is. This is the title of the tab. And this is where we're gonna call it my first website. And that will show up on the tab. And then here starts your body tag. This is where you put all of your actual HTML. This is where you put your design, your structures, all that good stuff. And we'll get to what that stuff is later on. So let's first start off with headings. So a heading is kind of just like a title. and it's also a tag, and these tags are the types of tags that you put inside of the body tag. And a heading goes from H1 to H6, H1 being the biggest, H6 being the smallest, and it's a title text. So as you can see here, your example of H1 tag, that's your largest size, and then it gets smaller and smaller into the H6 tag, which is smallest size. And these things are used to, it's kind of like section headers, and you can use it to title your sections in a website. And if you go to any of your favorite websites, just press inspect element. More chances are they're definitely using H1 tags and all of the other stuff that we'll be talking about too. So now text, paragraphs, the P tag. So this P tag allows you to write actual text in an organized fashion. So inside of the paragraph tag, you would, as expected, write any sentences, any words that you need on your slides. And while you can write it without the P tag and just write it without the P tag and just without that organization, having the P tag is essential because it allows you to organize and also style your code for later. We'll talk about that afterwards. Did anyone say anything?
Right, just to summarize that, the main part of the paragraph tag is just that allows you to do line breaks and format it that way.
Right. And some of the other formatting things that we have are strong, EM, and U. And strong is, it makes your text, as you can see over here. Oh, sorry about that. As you can see here, it makes your text bold, right? And EM makes your text italics, and U makes your text underlined. So as you can see here in the syntax, line 16, we have line 15, we have a normal P tag, and we just have the normal text there. And as you can see on line 1 over here in the output, it doesn't have any special bolding, italics, or anything. But in line 16, we introduced a strong tag, which makes it a bolded text. And whatever is inside of the strong tag that's the only part that's going to become bolded. So right now we have strong inside the bold tag, inside of the strong tag, and that's the only thing that's bolded. Then similarly, we have the EM tag, which is used for italics, and we have italic is the only thing that's inside of it, so hence it's the only thing italics, and underlined the same way. So these types of things you can memorize, or you could just search it up as you go. And we'll also include different important resources for like styling, HTML tips, and all that stuff later on.
Right. The important part to note about this is that basically HTML is just consists of opening and closing tags. Opening tags is just that word in angled brackets, and then to tell the browser, oh, we want to start whatever we're doing, strong, we want to bold, we want to start the paragraph here. And then when we end it, we do the same thing, but you can see on the slide, we have the / and that just tells the browser, we want to stop the bold, or we want to stop the paragraph right here. And
exactly.
All HTML is.
So everything is organized within these kinds of, if you could call them brackets, but they're not really brackets, but like starting and stopping kind of tags, as Alex mentioned. Go on to the next slide. Okay. Images, videos, and links. So links are probably the links and images. These things are all for media. And for links, we use what's called an anchor tag. And that is on line 15 right here. So we start the anchor tag with the less than symbol, and then we have the A, and then inside this, we'll explain what that is afterward. But we have inside of the A tag, anchor tag, we have the thing that we actually want, the text that we want to be like clicked, such that you open up the website, kind of. So like, for instance, let me explain with an example. So on line 15, we have this anchor tag with href. Href is an attribute, and what that tells you is when clicked, when the anchor tag is clicked, where should it go? What site should it open up to? And the next attribute that we have is target. So if a target attribute is not specified, the website opens up on its own that same web, like that same tab. Whereas if you include target is equal to underscore blank, that opens it up on a different tab, which is pretty useful. And here in the following statement, we have the Google. That's the actual thing this is a text that if you click, it takes you to google.com. And notice how the greater than symbol, the end of the starting tag, this thing right here, comes right after the attributes, the end of the attributes. Next, we can also put this inside of p tag, because this is what's known as an inline tag, right? And this can be stated inside of text, some sort of text tags, for instance, the p tag, paragraph tag. So right now we have, did you know that? And then here's the beginning of the a tag, anchor tag. And then we have Google, and the end of the a tag, anchor tag, is cool. So right now, if you can see that output, we have, did you know that? And then here's the anchor tag, just that Google part, and then is cool. So that's just pretty important because you will be using anchor tags very frequently in your websites. And we can move on to images. So images are kind of in a different fashion, a different standard. So we know that the p tag, we have a starting p tag and an ending p tag, right? Where we have the starting p tag with the less than symbol, p greater than symbol, and then the ending tag would be less than symbol / p greater than symbol. But with the image tag, it's just one tag. It's just one starting tag. So we have the less than symbol, image, and then you have the source, which is the place where you want to get the images from. So here we have, so if we go back to, so we state here that images / Google logo.png, right? So if we go back to right here, so this is where index.html is. So it can see these folders, CSS, HTML, images, JS. So what we're saying is go into the images folder and then pick out the Google logo PNG. And then the next attribute that is pretty crucial, especially when you're using e-readers or if some reason that the image doesn't load, this alt attribute will place some sort of text instead of the image. So if I was reading and using an e-reader or something like that, then, and I, for some reason, wasn't able to see the image, instead of displaying the image, it'll say Google logo right there. So then those people aren't like losing the contents of the image, So you still know what the image is about, and yeah. You can also add a size attribute to this image, right? And it'll be similar to right over here with this video, where we have a width and a height. The issue with the adding widths and height is that sometimes it might not scale properly. So when I was starting off, if you were to add these same dimensions into this image, this Google logo will not look like it is right now. It'll look shrunk. It'll look kind of dysmorphed. It might look taller than normal. It might look like skinnier than normal or wider than normal. So if you do not add the size attribute, then it'll just show up as the normal standard size. However, adding the size attributes will definitely be, the heights and widths will definitely be crucial when you're trying to arrange stuff in your website. And you'll be using CSS for that, or you can be when you are styling, you will want to move it around and make it look nice. And that's where this width and height will come in. With the video tag, we have a width, a height, and controls. So what this video tag is saying is that it'll create a window of width 700 and a height of 600. And then it'll also enable the controls, which is what you see down here, right? And then inside of the video tag, inside of it, we have the source. And inside of the source, we have two attributes too. So we have the actual source attribute. And this is where we direct the source tag to get the video. So as I said before, it would go into the images folder, and then inside of that, it says that there's a videos folder. And then inside of that, it's fetching the video.mp4. And we also have to specify the type so that it renders properly. And in this case, since it's an MP4, there's an MP4 along with it. So we'll move on to the next slide. Buttons. Buttons will be very useful too, because if you want some sort of nav bar or anything, even if this is a button, this slideshow button. So you'll be using buttons very frequently, and you can notice them on websites. So creating a button is pretty easy. So you just open up a button tag, and then inside of this, you can put whatever you want, and then that will show up on the inside of the button. And then you close the button tag. And this helps creating interactive websites. And it's not so that it won't just be like one single page of content. You can redirect this button to go other places, and it'll be very useful. Lists. So just move that out of the way. Lists. So we have an unordered list, an ordered list, and this one is just a description list. So we can have a bullet points, numbered, and these are all the different types of lists they are. And this is also a good research, good time to point out W3 Schools. Okay, so W3 Schools is a website that you can learn a lot of HTML, CSS, JavaScript. It's a great website, and it's a great tool to have, because they'll give you a lot of resources like this, where you can see all the different types of different types of lists. You can see the different types of what they do, how they look, and you can interact with it. You can try manipulating the list inside of their own editor. It's a really good resource. But getting back to the list, so we have first an unordered list. In this unordered list, we just have bullet points. Right now I have Apple, Samsung, LG, just random things that came up into my mind while I was writing this presentation. And this is the output for it. We have a bullet point of Apple, bullet point of Samsung, bullet point of LG. Then, oh, my bad. I keep thinking that this is the IDE, so I can just highlight, but then we have this HR tag. This is just creating a horizontal row. It's just a horizontal line. If you want it, you can use it, but I just used it to kind of separate them so that you guys can see the content better. Next, we have an ordered list, and as you would suspect, an ordered list it's ordered, right? So hence we have the numbers 1, 2, 3. You can go on forever, and it will just increment like that. And inside of these types of lists, I think you guys can see a commonality where we state the type of list that we're using. So here it's an unordered list, hence UL. Then we have an ordered list, which is OL. And then we open the tag, and then inside of that, we have these list tags. And inside the list tags, we have what we actually want to say. So for instance, inside of this list, I want Apple. So I have Apple in there. Inside of this list, I want Samsung to be there. So I have that. And that counts as an element of the list. And you can see how those are similar. Then we have this description list. Description list it'll look something like this, where we have where we'll have like a term that we're defining, and then the actual description part of it. So here we have Apple, and then we have this description founded by Steve Jobs. Similarly, you can see for these other two too. So that's just done by using the DT tag, and this defines a term. And then this one describes a description for the term. And you can do this over and over again, and you'll get some sort of similar list to what you see up here. But I highly suggest using W3 Schools because it'll be a great resource for you to use when learning HTML, when trying to reference things, trying to reference popular methods. It has it all. So I highly suggest using that. Divs. So divs you can think of as a container. So it contains some sort of information. It contains a bunch of tags. Like in this case, in this top case, it's containing a H4 tag, a heading 4 tag, 3 P tags, and so it's containing that. We will talk about what the advantages for using divs are, but while we talk about while we go into our CSS portion of the lesson. But essentially, divs create organization, and it'll be useful to compartmentalize. That's the second time I've tried to use that word, and the second time I failed at using it. But it compartmentalizes tags such that you can structure the website better and code the website and style the website. So inside of these divs, I'm sure you guys can see the difference between here and here, right? So here, this is just a normal div. It's just holding a heading 4 and a bunch of P tags. But here we introduced this attribute called a class and an ID.
Yes,
So I think
I'm just sorry, Nathan, I'm gonna stop you there because sure. That is talked about in slide 17.
Okay. Well, I'll just go over it really quickly, as I'm sure you guys can see it already. But a class is just something that's repeatable, and an ID, you can only have one of them. Just know that in the back of your head. Alex will explain it later on. Now we move on to CSS. So connecting CSS to HTML. So here, there are 3 ways to do it. And the first way is down here. We have the style tag embedded inside of the HTML. So this is an H1 tag, and just as how we had like a class attribute, a source attribute, an href attribute, here we have a style attribute, and we can include all of our styles and everything within this inline style tag. Then we also have up here, this entire unit. This is contained inside of the header tag, and it acts in a similar way to how you would use CSS in an external file. And here we have it at the top of the file. You can do this, but in my opinion, the best way to do it is to link this CSS file into the HTML file. And that's done in this example right here. So we have, we're linking it using this syntax. And HTML is very syntax heavy, so you're going to have to practice your skills to remember these types of these attributes, these tags, and all that stuff. So I highly recommend making a lot of starting off simple, making simple websites, and then eventually you'll get used to all of these, and you won't have to like think, you know, how do I link a CSS file and stuff like that. Because as you practice it more, it gets ingrained inside of your mind, and you don't have to think about it as much. But this is how you would link a CSS file. So we have the link tag, and then we have a rel attribute, and then we're saying that this relationship is a style sheet. So this, what we're going to pass into this is a style sheet. And then href, once again, is just accessing the actual file. So as you guys can see here, so the index.html, it goes into the CSS file and then opens up the main.css. Right. So finally, the last thing about CSS, connecting CSS to HTML is the order of precedence. So each of these has its own precedence. So it starts off as the lowest precedence. This is the lowest precedence, where you have a style sheet linked to another, this HTML sheet linked to another CSS file. So that has the lowest precedence. Then comes this one, which is in the head tag, and then finally this one. And what I mean by precedence is if there is an h1 tag and I'm changing the color of it to red inside of this link, but then I also have a h1 tag, and I have an inline style tag, and it says that the color is, let's say, green in this, just like in this case. If that's the case, then the precedence that this h1 tag will take is what's stated inside of this as an attribute. So right here. So it will rather take this style, this green color on, rather than the red color that I specified in the file. That's because it treats this attribute style tag as an inline style tag as more important and of more precedence than this one. And in a similar fashion, this inside the style tag, that takes on more precedence than the CSS, external CSS linked. We have classes versus IDs. This is what Alex was talking about earlier. So as you can see here, we have an h1 tag, and we've got three h1 tags and a p tag. So in each of these, we have a class. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I said the classes are repeatable. So you can organize and compartmentalize these h1 tags using this class, the class greeting. And notice how all of these are greetings, right? So I can call these all under the same class. And this is a greeting too. But these IDs are very specific to its own tag. So I cannot call what's on line 3. I cannot call this hello in green with the ID blue greeting, because blue greeting ID is already used over here in line 2. And because I want to maintain that how IDs are unique to its own tag, I cannot add a blue greeting ID to line 3 while having a blue greeting ID to line 2. So essentially, these classes are repeatable, but IDs are specific to the tag. Now, as you guys can see here, we've got a hello, we've got a hello in blue, a hello in green, and then we have a p tag that says hi in blue, right? So ideally, I want what's down here. But what happens if I just call the h1 tag, and this is inside of the CSS file, and this is a syntax for it too. So if you want to use a tag, a name, the name of a tag as a specifier, we can call that H1 and then open parentheses and then have all of the styling that I want. In this case, it's just color is equal to red, which changes the font color. So right now I am, in this example, I'm taking all of the H1s and then I'm changing it to the color red. So I think you guys can see the problem here, right? It's because these two, which is supposed to be in blue and green, are now in red. So how do I make it such that this, and also this is in black, this wasn't even referenced. So how do I make it such that this is red, this is blue, and this is green? Well, we can maybe use the classes that we identified, right? Let's see. So I say dot greeting, and dot references the class. A hashtag, on the other hand, references the ID inside of the CSS. And this is an important distinction, because when I say dot greeting, it's getting all of anything with the class of greeting it gets, and then it turns the font color to red. And I think you guys can see the problem there too. It changes this into red, this red, this red, and this red, when this is supposed to be blue, green, blue. So we finally get to the solution of this, where we set the H1 to red. We set the H1 to red. So it would look something like this. But then I also say that in the ID, the blue greeting ID, the blue greeting H1, which I reference using the hashtag because it's an ID, and then blue greeting, that I'll make as the color font blue. And then I'll do a similar thing with the green greeting, which I changed to green. And then finally, since there's only one P tag in this example, it's okay to use the P name tag and then say colors equal to blue. However, if I have another P tag and I say hi in red, then this wouldn't work. I would have to use the IDs again. So this is just a class versus ID. This is just a normal way a standard to both organize your code and also style it. Let's move on to padding, margin and padding. So there's a difference between margin and padding. So here we have just a normal orange box, right? Now, if I were to explain the difference between margin and padding, margin is what's outside of the element. So
I think first off, we should, sorry, Nathan. First off, we should clarify that margin and padding are both to add space they're both to add space either within or around an object. So it's all about spacing here as margin and padding.
Right. It's all about spacing. That's true. So, so here we're gonna have here we have an orange box, and that's denoted like this. Forget about the padding right for now. So margin is all of the padding outside of the box, outside of this box. So it's up here, down here, oh my God, down here, to the left, to the right, that's margin. Padding is what's happening inside of the box. So as you can see, there's not much space at the top of this, from the top of the box to the text, and neither is there much space from the bottom of the box to the text. So if I wanted this box to turn into this box, I would use this code. So I'm still maintaining the orange background color, but I'm saying that the width, so this is spanning from one side of the screen to another side of the screen. But if I only wanted it to be, let's say 100 pixels, right? We'll talk about the units for width and the units for all of this later. But if I wanted it to only be 100 pixels, then I can specify that. And that made the box shorter. The padding, 10 pixels, gives it space from the top and from the bottom. And that creates the spacing that we're seeing over here. Finally, this is a added bonus that I decided to add, which is border radius. As you can see here, if you guys can see it, it's a little small, but do you see the sharp edges? Those edges are, if you wanted those edges to be round, you use this border radius, and that smoothens out the the corners so that it's a little bit rounder. Margin keeps the, well, we'll also see another example of margin versus padding later on. But margin goes outside the element and padding is within the element. So here's with margin. So right now we have this normal standard box, right? We already coded out the padding. We worried about the padding and we got the extra space. But here, let's say we wanted to get some space because this is like stuck to the edge of the screen. But I want it to be, let's say, further out like this, right? So how do I make this into that? And that is the margin attribute. So this margin attribute, what it's doing is it's creating some space. It's adding this margin. If you can see here, this is the margin. This is the margin, but this is the padding. This is the padding. It's within the box. But margin, on the other hand, is outside the box. So this space this is 0 padding, but 0 margin. But this is 70 pixels of margin that you're getting, and that shifts the box outwards. Alex will explain further the difference between margin and padding, but for now, just know that padding is inside, margin is outside, and you can specify it inside of this. So CSS measurements, this is where Alex will take it away.
All right, Nathan, do you mind making the co-host?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And while we're doing that, I sent the link in chat a couple minutes ago. I'll just resend it. Oh, my bad. Wrong copy paste. Bro. I can't copy.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
All right, it'd be great if everyone could, I'll just share a screen.
Sure. I will stop sharing screen. Do you want to? Okay. You can share the presentation too.
All right. So if you go to the repository, you will see there is in the top right corner, there's a green button code. You press that and then you hit download zip. And that will allow you to download the code and open it on locally, and you can see all of how this app works. And in Bootcamp session 2, we will be adding scripts to make this actually functional. As you can see right now, nothing works. This is just the styling, and that's what we'll be going over for the rest of the bootcamp. So CSS measurements. The main thing that you've seen so far throughout the presentation is is a bunch of these measurements like pixels, rem, and em. And the whole point of that is pixels are an absolute value. So what that means is that if I take let's say I want to have a square that's 10 pixels wide, that will appear 10 pixels wide on every single screen, no matter if the user sets the default font size as something smaller, something bigger. So that's why we don't use pixels. And what we want to use is this thing called rem, R-E-M. And what that is it will size everything relatively to the given font size. And that will allow the content to scale on different devices. And that brings me to my other point, which is accessibility. Our whole responsibility as web developers, especially not just developers, as web developers, is to make sure that all of our content is accessible to all users. They're on tablets, iPads, or tablets, phones, or laptops. All right, and one of the biggest things that I think should just be a default in CSS is this right here, which is it specifies box sizing as border box. What that means is, let's say I want to have an item of a width, and I say the width I want to be 2 rem. And by default, it'll make the content 2 rem. So this is the blue box right here. It'll make just this part 2 rem. And then I can add additional padding, I can add border and margin, and the entire object as a whole will now no longer be 2 rem because of the additional added space. So I want to specify border box to say that I want this entire box to be 2 rem, not just the things in, not just things inside. All right. So if you look at the,
I think we have a question in chat. If
Yes.
we just address that.
what are the proportions of the length to width of the screen the user is using is different. So I guess I just need to clarify that rem is referring to is relative to the root font size. So it doesn't matter if the length and the width of the screens are different. There are different ways to handle different screen ratios by using media queries, for example, which is outside of the scope of this presentation. As you can see here, if we go to developer tools by hitting inspect there, you can see that this app scales fine on a bunch of different screen sizes. This is 50%, that's why it's so small. So we don't need to, in most cases, we don't need to worry about the ratio of the screen. But you can look into media queries about that. All right, so here we have everything nice and centered. And this is like a really big thing with web developers. How do I center things, right? If you Google this, you'll see a lot of old documentation about vertical align. But today I want to introduce you, I just want to jumpstart you with this thing called Flexbox. How Flexbox works is first we have a container here, and we want to set this, we want to tell it to use the flex display. And then we want to say, with a Flexbox, we have 2 keywords. We have our main axis here, and this is by default, it's our horizontal axis. And if we want to, and then we have our vertical axis, this also called the cross axis. Then here you can see what flex direction does. It just basically tells us how do we just like flow these elements into place? How do we, in what order should we display these elements? So here, as you can see, we have a column of elements. So we want to say display it by column. And then here, I just want to highlight the importance of the developer tools. As you can see, I'll make it bigger, sorry. In the corner of some of the elements will be this button called Flex, and you can see exactly how this is displayed. We have a top container and we have a bottom container. And the reason why they're spaced apart is because of our next attribute, which is justify content. And justify content will align items based on our main axis. And because in this case, we specify that our main axis was a column, we are now aligning things based on the main axis. And here we said space between. So we're just putting as much space as possible between these 2 elements. And then another really cool thing, if you just want to play around with this, you can highlight these different things, click on them, see what happens. And if you want to follow along, I also sent the link to the live server in the chat a couple minutes ago. You would just go here down to the bottom. Once you have that installed, you would hit go live, and then that will allow you to open the index.html file. And you'll be able to make these changes without actually reloading. All right, another thing I want to highlight is the width. So right here, we have this new unit called VW. What VW means is view width. It just stands for view width, and that just specifies that we want 80% of the view width as the width. But this is obviously not 80%, right? That's because we have a max width. So this is all about our responsibility as web developers is all about making our content as accessible to many people as possible. So some people have really, really, really wide screens, right? And if we were to do 80% of that, it would be this content would go extremely wide and like there's nothing to focus on. So that's why we have this, sorry about that. We have the max width property and we just say max width 60 rem. All right, and let's go down to the add container. We can see that we have this new property, position sticky. And what that means is if we have here I'm going to highlight this and hold Alt, Shift, and the down arrow. And this will just allow me to duplicate things really, really quickly. And you can see we want our background to be white. You can see that as we scroll, this add container right here just stays in the bottom, and that's because we have this thing called sticky. It just sticks there. And we want to specify that it's from the bottom by 2 rem. We have different position properties. We have absolute, which allows us to position that anywhere on the page. We have relative, which is similar. And we also have fixed, which will also pop this element out of the layout. I won't go too much into this as this is an introductory session. But these different position elements are really useful. And again, you can always ping any of the mentor sponsors on Discord and we can help you out with that without the hackathon. And here we have a border property, and that just allows us to draw a border around this element. And this is also the first time that this variable appears. And that basically what a variable is that it allows us to reuse this color anywhere we want. And we specify that with this root selector up here. And you can see primary. This color primary, bar primary, is actually this nice purple blue color. Box shadow, that basically allows us to give it a shadow. And I'm going to be honest with you, this is really hard to remember. Every time I need it, I would just go to, I'll just go to the documentation for that. So I will not be explaining that as we're also running out of time. Another really important thing in CSS I want to highlight today is the selectors. So as you can see here, we select all the button tags just by typing button and the open braces and the open curly braces and the closing curly braces. But we also have these special selectors. This asterisk is used not just in CSS, but in a lot of coding languages. And you can see here, if we hover over it, VS Code is nice enough to tell us that this means we select all elements. And similarly, if we hover over these where we have the dot in front, that means we're selecting classes. You can see here, it gives us an example. It can be any tag, and then we have the class specifically as add container. And now this selector, when we put a space between 2 elements, that just means that this first element, this first selector will be the parent, will be like the container. And the second element will be the child. And that doesn't have to be a direct child. It can have a lot of elements in between that. So we can have a container inside of a container inside of a container, and then an input. And this will still select that, and we can still style it. A really special thing for more advanced styling is the double colon property. So if we hover over that, you can see that we're selecting the placeholder here. It's a bit confusing for inputs, and I would recommend when you're starting out to just search up the syntax for that. But a more important one would be the single colon and what we call an item state. What an item state is we can select specific styles for when we're hovering over something, when we're clicking on something, etc. So here we can do, when we hover, we make the background color gray. And we can hover over it and it turns gray. Going back to the flex box that we talked about earlier, we have two ways to position things inside of a flex box. We have our justify content, which I talked about earlier, but we also have this new property, align self. And basically alignment would be on the cross axis. So in a default flex box, remember our justify content would organize on our horizontal main axis, and align items would just organize them on a vertical or cross axis. So here we just say we want to stretch this element as much as possible on the vertical axis. That's what align self stretch is. And that pretty much goes over everything in all of the main concepts in the styles for the To Do app. If you have any questions, feel free to put them now in chat, or you can just unmute yourself and I will answer them.
Also, you guys can see what you guys learned. We learned divs, and you can see how divs are used right here. Alex, as you can see the class item in each one of these like types of templates, kind of, if you could call them. And Alex, can we go to the CSS and see what class item is actually, what's happening there? Oh, okay. Yeah, so we have the display flex already here, and we've got all of the flex stuff, but we also have your padding, your height, your border radius, border. We all talked about this. And also, if you guys would like to see see different types of like styling tips or something, or different ways to style stuff, or anything like that, as Alex mentioned, most likely, yes. The recording most likely will be recorded.
Yeah, I'll be uploading the live stream, so I'll send the link out to anyone who needs to watch bits or pieces of it. So yeah, just like message us in chat. We're always active. I'll be sharing the link with you guys soon.
Yeah. So just to finish up, you can see all of the stuff that we talked about and how it's being used in the actual, like, in an actual product like this To Do app. Any other questions?
All right, I just want to highlight real quick the advantage of using Visual Studio Code over like Notepad++ or Notepad. You can highlight over any of these things and you can click on them. And it'll bring you to the docs of all of them. And it'll also give you autocomplete for whether you want it checked. You can see it checked. You can hover. So active state, it'll give you hints for all of these. So even if we're not here, you still have help.
Yeah, so once again, Alex already showed you guys this, but the Mozilla documentation is kind of where you guys should be going for any questions about, other than us. But if you guys want to be coding outside of this tournament, outside of this hackathon, Mozilla is where to go for CSS help. And you can go to like anywhere for HTML. Just do a quick Google search, and chances are that somebody has either encountered a similar situation as you or similar problem as you, or has tried to implement something that you have trying to implement, and they'll help you out too. So I'll put the Mozilla documentation just for anybody. Oh, there we go. Oh, okay. Well, Alex beat me to it. There you go. Okay. If that's no other questions, then I guess we're good to go.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. And we